The Galactic Concord had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. 900 star systems answered to their laws. The elder races who controlled this vast empire had seen countless species rise and fall. They had created a system to measure the worth of every civilization they encountered. Some species were marked as valuable. Others were marked as dangerous. Most were marked as neither. Ambassador Vrethon belonged to the Sithari, one of the oldest races in the Concord. His body was made of living crystal that caught light and turned it into rainbows. His people could read minds and speak without words. They considered themselves the highest form of life in the galaxy. When Concord sensors detected strange signals coming from a small yellow star at the edge of the galaxy, the Council sent Vrethon to investigate. He traveled for 3 months through the darkness between stars. His ship carried a crew of 200 and weapons powerful enough to crack a planet in half. This was standard procedure. The Concord always approached new species with overwhelming force. It reminded the newcomers of their place in the universe. The yellow star grew larger in his view screen. Vrethon counted the planets orbiting it. 8 worlds, most of them cold and dead. But the third planet was different. It was blue and green and white, covered in water and clouds. Life signals pulsed from its surface like a heartbeat. Vrethon reached out with his mind and touched the thoughts of the beings below. What he found surprised him. These creatures were weak. They had no mental shields, no psychic abilities at all. Their minds were open books, filled with strange emotions and stranger dreams. They called themselves humans. His ship entered orbit around their world. The humans detected him immediately and sent messages filled with mathematical patterns. They were trying to communicate. Vrethon found this amusing. Most primitive species either attacked or hid when they saw a Concord vessel. These humans were actually excited. He allowed them to send representatives to his ship. 3 humans arrived in a tiny vessel that looked like it might fall apart at any moment. They wore suits to protect themselves from the vacuum of space. Vrethon noted this weakness. His people could survive in the void without protection. The human leader was a female named Sarah Chen. She smiled when she saw Vrethon, showing her teeth in a display that he found unsettling. But her mind held no hostility, only curiosity and hope. "We have waited so long to meet others like ourselves," she said through a translation device. "We always believed we were not alone." Vrethon studied her carefully. She was small and soft, with thin skin that would tear easily. Her lifespan, he learned from her thoughts, was less than 100 years. His own people lived for millennia. These humans were mayflies, burning bright and dying fast. Over the next 3 cycles, Vrethon conducted his evaluation. He visited their cities and found them chaotic and noisy. He examined their technology and found it primitive. They had only recently learned to leave their own planet. Their weapons were chemical and crude. They had no shields, no energy weapons, no faster-than-light travel. But they were eager to share everything with him. They showed him their art, their music, their history. They held nothing back. Vrethon watched recordings of their wars and saw how they had nearly destroyed themselves many times. Yet they had always survived. They were resilient, he admitted. Like insects, the humans asked him endless questions about the galaxy. They wanted to know about other species, about the Concord's laws, about the hyperlanes that connected distant stars. Vrethon answered some questions and ignored others. He noticed that the humans wrote everything down. They recorded every conversation. They were collectors of information. Sarah Chen invited him to a meal, which Vrethon found barbaric. Humans consumed the flesh of other creatures to survive. They required constant intake of water and nutrients. So many weaknesses. What will happen now? Sarah asked him over the meal. "Will we join your Concord?" Vrethon considered the question. "You will be evaluated. A classification will be assigned. This will determine your role in galactic civilization." So what roles are available? Many, Vrethon said. Some species serve as warriors, others as scientists, others as laborers. The Concord finds a place for everyone. Sarah nodded slowly. Her smile never wavered, but something flickered behind her eyes. Vrethon tried to read her deeper thoughts, but she seemed to be thinking about nothing important. Just gratitude. Just hope. He dismissed it as the simple mind of a primitive being. When the evaluation was complete, Vrethon prepared his report. He had a list of categories to choose from, each one defining a species for the rest of their existence. Category Alpha was reserved for the most dangerous civilizations, those that must be destroyed immediately. Category Beta meant a species with military potential that required watching. The categories continued downward. Measuring threat and usefulness in cold numbers, Vrethon placed humanity in category Thatanine. This was the lowest classification. It meant the species was harmless. It meant they had no military value, no special abilities, no potential for growth. Thatanine species were often used as labor forces. Sometimes they provided biological resources. They were never considered threats. He filed his report and left the yellow star behind. The humans waved goodbye from their tiny ships. Sarah Chen sent a final message thanking him for his visit. She hoped they would see each other again. Vrethon deleted the message without responding. He had already forgotten her name. What he did not know, what he could not have known, was that the humans had wanted this result. They had read the Concord's public databases. They had studied what happened to species marked as threats. Those civilizations were destroyed without mercy, their planets burned, their people scattered. Humanity had decided to be underestimated deep beneath the frozen moon of Titan. Human engineers were already working on something new. They had taken Vrethon's ship apart with their eyes during his visit. They had analyzed his weapons, his shields, his engines. They had smiled and nodded and played the part of harmless primitives while their minds worked on designs for ships. That would make Vrethon's vessel look like a toy. Sarah Chen returned to Earth and met with the United Defense Council in a room buried miles underground. Classified us as Thatanine, she reported. Non-threatening. The council members looked at each other. Some smiled. Others nodded grimly. Good, said the chairman. Then we have time. How long until the first ships are ready? 20 years for the first prototypes. 40 years for a full fleet? Then we wait, the chairman said. We smile. We pay whatever tribute they ask. And we build. On the surface above them, humans went about their daily lives unaware of what was coming. But in the darkness beneath their feet, in shipyards hidden from every sensor, the future was taking shape. They called humanity. Non-threatening. Humanity intended to prove them wrong. 40 years passed like water through open fingers. Humanity joined the Galactic Concord as a minor species, just as Vrethon had predicted. They accepted the protection that came with their low status. They bowed their heads when elder race ambassadors visited their system. They paid their tributes in metals and minerals dug from the asteroids that floated between their planets. The galaxy saw exactly what it expected to see. A primitive species learning its place. A harmless civilization grateful for the scraps thrown to them by their betters. But beneath the surface, humanity was changing. Yara Chen had been a child when the Sithari first arrived. She remembered watching the Crystal Ambassador on television, remembered the mixture of wonder and fear in her parents' eyes. Now, she was a woman of 50, her black hair streaked with gray, her eyes hard from decades of secrets. She commanded the United Earth Defense Council from a base hidden in the ice of Europa. On the surface, the moon looked empty. Beneath the frozen ocean, city of engineers and soldiers worked day and night on projects that officially did not exist. Yara had spent 20 years building a network that spanned the galaxy. She traveled on Concord trade ships, posing as a merchant. She visited dozens of worlds and met hundreds of species. And she learned something that changed everything. Humanity was not alone in its suffering. The Velith were a people of fur and claws, hunters by nature. The Concord had conquered them 3,000 years ago and broken their spirit. Now they worked in mines and factories, their proud heritage reduced to stories told in whispers. Yara found them angry and ready to listen. The Or and I were engineers, their minds built for creation. The Concorde used them to design ships and weapons, but gave them no credit and no freedom. Yara found them bitter and brilliant. There were others. The Cassith, the Morvani, the Thelic. Species classified as lesser, as broken, as contained. All of them waiting for something to change. All of them needing hope. Yara gave them hope. She shared humanity's plans in coded messages. She promised that one day the Concorde would face an enemy it could not defeat. She asked only for patience and for help when the time came. Meanwhile, the shipyards of Titan continued their work. The first human dreadnought, the Prometheus, had been completed 10 years ago. It was 3 kilometers long and carried weapon systems copied from Concorde designs, but improved by human minds. Where Concorde ships used psychic links for coordination, human ships used quantum networks that moved information faster than thought. 11 more dreadnoughts followed the Prometheus. Each one was hidden in the darkness of space, disguised as asteroids or hidden in the shadows of gas giants. Concorde sensors never detected them. The elder races were not looking for threats from a That-9 species. Everything changed on a spring morning in the 41st year. Yara was in her command center when the alert came. A Sithari dreadnought had entered Earth's system without warning. It was the largest vessel the Concorde had ever sent to human space. It settled into orbit around Earth like a predator watching its prey. The message came an hour later. Ambassador Vrethon's face appeared on every screen on the planet. He had not aged. His crystalline body still caught light and turned it into colors. His voice still carried that same tone of cold superiority. People of Earth, he announced, the Concorde has decided to elevate your status. You should feel honored. Yara watched the transmission with her officers around her. None of them spoke. Your system contains resources valuable to the Sithari people, Vrethon continued. Rare isotopes necessary for our reproduction. In exchange for access to these resources, humanity will be elevated to Theta 7 status. You will receive better technology, better trade agreements. A voice in minor Concorde matters. He paused. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. In return, you will provide biological tributes. 10,000 human specimens each month. They will be used for research that will benefit the Sithari species. This is not a request. This is a requirement of your new status. The transmission ended. Across Earth, people screamed in horror. Riots broke out in a dozen cities. The terror spread like fire, but in her command center beneath Europa's ice, Yara Chen felt nothing but cold focus. They want our people for experiments, her second officer said. His voice shook. They want to take our children. They want to see if we'll submit, Yara replied. They've done this before. The Velith told me about it. The Concorde test species sometimes pushes them to see how much they'll accept, and if we refuse, then they destroy us. Yara turned to face her officers. Contact the Prometheus. Send the signal to all hidden positions. It's time to wake up our fleet. What about Earth? That dreadnought could bombard the surface before we reach them. We won't attack yet. We need time to coordinate with our allies. Yara's mind raced through calculations. Request a meeting with Vrethon. Tell him the council needs 30 days to prepare the tributes. Tell him we're honored by the elevation. Her officers stared at her. Tell him we're scared and grateful, she continued. Tell him everything he expects to hear from a Thatanine species. Make him believe we've already surrendered. I sent the message. Vrethon responded within the hour. He seemed pleased by humanity's submission. 30 days was granted. The humans could use the time to select their tributes and prepare. Facilities for the Sithari researchers who would soon arrive. Ada read his response and allowed herself a small smile. 30 days. It was more than enough time. She opened a secure channel to her allies. The Velith commanders received their instructions. The Oranai engineers confirmed their ships were ready. A dozen other species checked in, each one waiting for the signal that would change everything. On Earth, humans cried and held their children close. They did not know what was coming. They could not know. The secret had been kept for 4 decades because it had to be kept. One leaked word could have brought the full might of the Concorde down on humanity before they were ready. But they were ready now, in the shadows of the solar system. 12 dreadnoughts waited in silence. Their crews ran final checks on weapons that had never been fired. Their captains studied battle plans that had been refined for 20 years. Their engines hummed with power that the Concorde had never imagined possible. Yara Chen looked at the image of Rethon's dreadnought hanging above Earth. In 30 days, she would show him what a Thattenine species could do. In 30 days, she would teach the Concorde a lesson written in fire and darkness. But first, she had one more message to send to all positions. Prepare for Prometheus Rising. The countdown begins now. The message traveled through hidden channels, bouncing between quantum relays scattered across 1,000 light-years. It reached ships waiting in asteroid fields, bases buried in frozen moons, fleets hiding in the shadows of dying stars, and everywhere it went, humans and their allies began to move. The galaxy was about to learn the truth. Humanity had never been harmless. They had simply been waiting. The 29th day arrived with cold stars and colder silence. Ambassador Vrethon stood on the bridge of his dreadnought, watching Earth turn slowly below. He had spent the month monitoring human communications. Their leaders argued and wept. Their people protested in the streets. Some tried to flee to the outer planets, as if distance could save them from the Concorde's reach. It was all so predictable. Every species reacted the same way when faced with tribute demands. First came denial, then anger, then bargaining. Finally, acceptance. Vrethon had seen this cycle 100 times. Humanity would be no different. His tactical officer approached with a data tablet. Ambassador, we have detected unusual energy readings from several locations in the system. Vrethon barely glanced at the report. Define unusual. Brief power spikes, consistent with reactor ignitions. But they faded before we could pinpoint their sources. Equipment malfunctions, Vrethon decided. The humans have old technology. Their systems are unreliable. Should we investigate? No. Tomorrow we collect the first tribute shipment. Focus on that. Vrethon waved his hand in dismissal. These creatures are Thattenine. They have no capacity for anything that should concern us. The tactical officer nodded and returned to his station. He did not argue. No one argued with the Cytheri ambassador. Far from Earth, in the darkness beyond the asteroid belt, Commander Yara Chen stood in the heart of the Prometheus. The ship was awake now, all systems running at full power. Around her, officers worked at stations that hummed with energy. The air itself seemed to vibrate with potential. She touched a panel and opened a channel to the fleet. 11 other dreadnoughts waited in the void, their crews as ready as hers. 40 years of secrets were about to end. All ships, this is Prometheus Actual, she said. Her voice was steady. Begin final systems check. We move in 6 hours. Acknowledgements came back from each vessel. The Defiance was ready. The Unconquered was ready. The Remember What They Did name by a captain who had lost family to Concorde mining accidents was ready. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. Ready. Yara closed the channel and allowed herself a moment of doubt. She was about to start a war against an empire that had lasted 12,000 years. An empire that had crushed every rebellion before it. An empire that commanded millions of warships and billions of soldiers. But she thought of the children on Earth, waiting to be taken. She thought of the Velith and the Orinai and all the other species who lived in chains. She thought of her grandmother Sarah, who had smiled at Vrethon 4 decades ago while hiding the fire of revolution in her heart. The doubt faded. This was the moment they had built toward. This was the reason they had smiled and bowed and pretended to be harmless. No more pretending. 6 hours later, a single transmission pulsed outward from Earth. It was simple and short. 2 words that meant nothing to Concorde sensors: Prometheus Rising. Across 200 hidden locations, massive reactors roared to life. Electromagnetic shields that had hidden ships for decades fell away like shed skin. Engines that had waited in cold silence for this moment burned bright. The first to emerge was the Prometheus itself. It rose from behind a dead moon. 3 kilometers of black metal and sharp angles. Weapon systems that existed in no Concorde database powered up with a sound like thunder. The ship's silhouette blocked out stars as it moved toward Earth. Behind it came the others. The Defiance emerged from an asteroid field, scattering rocks like a giant waking from sleep. The Unconquered dropped its disguise in the shadow of Jupiter. Ship after ship appeared, each one a monument to 4 decades of hidden work. 12 dreadnoughts formed a line between Earth and the Scythery vessel. Their weapons locked onto Vrethan's ship, their shields activated with a hum that carried through the void. On the Scythery bridge, alarms screamed. Vrethan stared at his view screen in disbelief. His crystalline body flickered with colors that reflected his confusion. "This is impossible," he said. "They are Thatnine. They have no ships. They have no weapons." "Ambassador, those vessels are transmitting identification codes," his tactical officer reported. His voice trembled. "They are human. All of them are human. That cannot be. Their weapons are targeting us." "Ambassador, their weapons are more powerful than ours. Significantly more powerful." Vrethan's mind reached out, trying to touch the thoughts of the humans aboard those ships. He found nothing but walls. The humans had learned to shield their minds. Another impossibility. A transmission cut through the chaos. The main view screen flickered and showed a human face. She was old now, gray-haired and lined, but her eyes burned with fierce intelligence. Vrethan recognized something in those eyes. "Something familiar, Ambassador Vrethan," the woman said. "My name is Admiral Yara Chen. You met my grandmother 40 years ago. She said you were arrogant and blind. She was right." "This is rebellion," Vrethan replied, forcing his voice to remain calm. "The Concord will destroy you. The Concord will try." Yara leaned forward. "But first, let me explain your situation. You have 1 ship. We have 12. Your weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Ours can penetrate yours. You are alone in hostile space, with no reinforcements within reach. The Concord will send fleets. Hundreds of ships. Thousands. We know. We're counting on it." Yara's smile was nothing like her grandmother's had been. It held no warmth, no welcome, only cold promise. "You came here expecting to take our children. Instead, you will deliver a message to your masters. Humanity rejects your tribute. Humanity rejects your classification. Humanity rejects everything you stand for. You cannot win this war." "Maybe not. But we can make it cost more than you're willing to pay." Yara paused. "You have 1 hour to leave our system. After that, we open fire. You would not dare." Yara's smile widened. "Ambassador, you classified us as non-threatening. You decided we were harmless based on 3 months of observation. You saw that we had no claws, no venom, no psychic powers, and you concluded that we were weak." She leaned closer to the screen, her voice dropping to something almost gentle. "You forgot to check what happens when you threaten our children. You forgot to ask what we're capable of when we're angry. You forgot that the species that survives isn't always the strongest or the fastest."
Oh.
Her eyes hardened. "Sometimes it's the one that refuses to give up." Vrethan looked at the ships surrounding his vessel. He looked at the readings showing weapons that should not exist, shields that should not be possible. He looked at the face of a woman whose grandmother had smiled and bowed and hidden a revolution behind her eyes. For the first time in his long life, Vrethan felt something he had only read about in historical records. Something the Scythari had not experienced in millennia. Fear. "This is not over," he said. "The Concord will respond. We're counting on it," Yara repeated. "Now run back to your masters. Tell them what you've seen. Tell them that the harmless species has teeth." Vrethan cut the transmission. His hands shook as he gave the order to retreat. Behind him, 12 human dreadnoughts watched him flee. Their weapons stayed locked on his ship until he reached the edge of the system and vanished into the hyperlane. Wire watched him go. Then she opened a channel to her fleet. "Phase 1 complete," she said. "Now we prepare for Phase 2. The Concord will send a subjugation fleet. When they arrive, we'll be ready." Her officers cheered. But Yara did not celebrate. This was only the beginning. The hardest battles were still to come. She looked at the stars beyond her view screen and thought of her grandmother, who had started this journey 4 decades ago with nothing but a smile and a dream. "We did it," she thought. We showed them who we are. Now we show them what we can do. The Concord High Council met in a chamber made of living light. The elder races gathered around a table that floated above an artificial star, their forms casting long shadows across the glowing floor. They had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They had never been challenged like this. The humans must be destroyed, declared the Scythery representative. His crystalline body blazed with angry colors. Their rebellion threatens the foundation of our order. If one species defies us, others will follow. The Morith ambassador, a creature of smoke and whispers, spoke next. We agree. Send a subjugation fleet. Burn their world. Make an example that will echo through history. There was no debate. The decision was made in moments. 300 warships would travel to the human system. They would arrive, destroy everything, and return. Simple. Clean. A reminder to the galaxy of what happened to species that forgot their place. The fleet departed within the week. 300 vessels, each one crewed by warriors who had never known defeat. They moved through the hyperlanes like a river of fire, confident in their purpose. Certain of their victory, they never reached Earth. Admiral Yara Chen had studied Concord, military doctrine for 20 years. She knew how they thought, how they moved, how they fought. She knew that their fleets always traveled through major hyperlanes because their commanders believed. Smaller routes were beneath them. She knew that they coordinated their attacks through psychic networks that required time to establish. Most importantly, she knew exactly where they would emerge. The Kepler Passage was a narrow corridor of stable space between two unstable regions. Any fleet traveling to Earth had to pass through it. There was no other way. The Concord knew this. They were not worried. 300 ships could handle any ambush, but when they emerged from the hyperlane, they found something unexpected. The human dreadnoughts were there. 12 massive vessels arranged in a defensive formation, their weapons already charged, but they were not alone. Behind them flew ships that bore the marks of the Velith remnant, vessels that the Concord believed destroyed centuries ago. Their hulls were painted with hunting symbols from a culture that had been declared dead. Beside them flew Orani cruisers, their designs elegant and deadly. Engineers who had spent generations building ships for their masters finally built ships for themselves. And there were others. Kassith fighters, small but fast, darting between the larger vessels like angry insects. Morvani carriers, their holds full of drones that the Concord had never seen before. Thelic destroyers, crewed by soldiers who had waited 300 years for this moment. The Coalition of the Forgotten. That was what Yara had named them. Species that the Concord had broken and discarded. Species that had been waiting in silence for someone to give them hope. Humanity had given them hope. Now they had come to repay the debt. The Concord commander stared at his view screen in shock. This is impossible. Those species are contained. They have no military capacity. They have it now, his tactical officer replied. Sir, I'm counting over 200 enemy vessels. They're blocking the passage. We cannot advance without engaging them. Then we engage. The commander's voice hardened. We outnumber them. We have superior technology. We have 12,000 years of experience. These primitives and their broken allies cannot stand against the Concord. He gave the order to attack. The Battle of Kepler Passage began with fire and fury. Concord ships launched waves of missiles and energy beams. Their psychic networks hummed as commanders coordinated their assault. They expected the enemy to scatter. They expected chaos and confusion. They found neither. The coalition ships moved with perfect coordination. Human dreadnoughts absorbed the first wave of attacks, their shields holding against weapons that should have destroyed them. Then they returned fire with technology that the Concord had never encountered. Quantum torpedoes, the humans called them. They phased through Concord shields as if they did not exist. They struck reactors and engines with surgical precision. Concord ships that had survived 1,000 battles died in seconds. But the weapons were not the true advantage. The true advantage was communication. Concord fleets relied on psychic networks to coordinate. These networks required time to establish, and could be disrupted by mental interference. The Coalition used something different: quantum-entangled communicators, built by Orani engineers and powered by Velith reactors. Information moved between ships instantly, faster than thought. It's impossible to block. The humans had studied every Concord defeat in recorded history. They knew how the elder races fought. They knew their weaknesses, their blind spots, their assumptions. And they exploited every single one. Yara commanded the battle from the bridge of the Prometheus. Around her, officers called out updates in calm voices. Casualty reports. Targeting solutions. Enemy movements. She processed it all, making decisions in heartbeats. The enemy flagship is vulnerable, her tactical officer reported. Their shields are failing. All ships, focus fire on the flagship, Yara ordered. Take it down. 12 dreadnoughts turned their weapons on a single target. The Concord commander barely had time to scream before his ship vanished in a ball of fire. Without their commander, the Concord fleet fell into confusion. Their psychic network collapsed. Ships fired wildly, sometimes hitting each other. Captains gave contradictory orders. The disciplined force that had entered the passage became a mob of panicking survivors. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Concord fleet was broken. 112 ships had surrendered. The rest had fled or been destroyed. The passage was littered with debris and bodies. YARA looked at the carnage and felt no joy. Only relief. Only exhaustion. Only grim determination for what came next. Secure the prisoners, she ordered. Treat them well. We are not like them. Her officers moved to obey. The Coalition ships began the work of rescue and recovery, pulling survivors from damaged vessels, regardless of what species they belonged to, across the galaxy. The news spread through channels that the Concord did not control, whisper networks among servants, coded messages in trade manifests, secret signals between oppressed peoples who had long since given up hope. The Concord had been defeated, not by another elder race. Not by a powerful civilization. It's by humans. By a species that had been classified as harmless less than 50 years ago. And they had not fought alone. They had brought allies. Species that the Concord had declared broken were rising again. Species that had been silent were finding their voices. On 100 worlds, beings who had lived in chains looked at the stars and wondered if their chains might finally break in the Concord capital. The High Council received the news of their defeat. For the first time in millennia, they felt something unfamiliar: uncertainty, doubt, fear. They had underestimated the humans. They had underestimated the power of hope. They had assumed that broken spirits stayed broken forever. They were wrong, and aboard the Prometheus, Admiral Yara Chen looked at the stars and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The first battle was won, but the war was far from over. The Concord would respond with everything they had, and when they did, humanity would be ready. She opened a channel to her fleet. All ships, this is Prometheus Actual. Today we proved that the Concord can be beaten. Tomorrow, we show them that they cannot win. Rest while you can. The next battle will be harder. She closed the channel and watched the debris of the Concord fleet drift through space. 40 years of waiting. One battle to change everything. And now, the galaxy would never be the same. The Cytheri homeworld of Kethvorin was a place of ancient beauty. It orbited a blue giant star that the Cythari had worshipped since before they learned to make fire. They called it the First Light. Every temple on their world faced toward it. Every prayer they spoke was addressed to its brilliance. The Concord. High Council chose this sacred place for their war meeting. They gathered the largest defensive fleet in recorded history. 5,000 warships formed a shell around the planet. Orbital stations bristled with weapons. Ground batteries pointed at the sky. Nothing could approach Kethvorin without facing overwhelming force. Inside the council chamber, the elder races argued about what to do. The defeat at Kepler Passage had shaken them. Species that had never questioned Concord supremacy were now whispering about rebellion. The carefully maintained order of 12,000 years was cracking. We must crush them completely, the Sithari representative insisted. No mercy. No negotiation. Destroy their worlds, their ships, their allies. Leave nothing behind. I will take resources, the Morith ambassador replied. Many resources. The coalition controls multiple systems now. Other species may join them while we are distracted. Then we make an example so terrible that no one else dares to follow. The debate continued for hours. No one noticed the sensors flickering. No one paid attention to the strange readings at the edge of the system. They were too focused on their arguments, too confident in their defenses. Then the sky began to change. It started slowly. The blue light of the first light seemed to dim, just slightly. The Sithari on the surface looked up with confusion. Their sun had burned steady for billions of years. It did not simply grow darker, but it was growing darker. Minute by minute, the light faded. Blue became purple. Purple became gray. The warmth that had bathed Kethferon since its birth began to slip away. Alarms screamed across the planet. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Sithari priests cried out in psychic anguish, their faith shattered by the impossible sight of their dying god. Ambassador Vrethon rushed to an observation deck. What he saw there would haunt him for the rest of his long life. Humanity's dreadnoughts had arrived. Not 12 ships now, but 40. They surrounded the first light in a perfect sphere, and from each ship extended a structure that defied understanding. A lattice of dark material that seemed to drink the light itself. The Prometheus ray. Human scientists had designed it in secret. Oronai engineers had helped build it. Velith metallurgists had created the materials. It was a weapon that did not destroy. It did something worse. It stole light. Each minute, more of the first light vanished behind the spreading darkness. The temperature on Kethferon dropped. Plants began to wilt. Sithari bodies, made of living crystal that needed light to survive, began to crack and fade. They are killing our sun, Vrethon whispered. They are killing our god. Transmission cut through the screaming chaos. Admiral Yara Chun's face appeared on every screen in the system. She looked tired, older than she had seemed at Kepler Passage, but her voice was steady. People of the Concord, she said, this is not an attack. This is a demonstration. We are not destroying your star. We are showing you that we could, at any moment, to any world you hold dear. The Sithari screamed louder. Their psychic wails echoed across the planet. You built an empire on fear, Yara continued. You made other species bowed by threatening to burn their worlds. You never thought anyone would dare to do the same to you. She paused. You were wrong. Vrethon found his voice. What do you want? I want you to understand something, Ambassador. We could darken every star in the Concord. We have the technology. We have the will. You threatened to take our children for experiments. You classified us as non-threatening while planning to use us like livestock. Her eyes hardened. Hey, we are not livestock. We are not servants. We are not a lesser species to be used and discarded. We are human beings, and we will not be treated as anything less. We will negotiate, Vrethon said quickly. The cold was spreading through his crystalline body. He could feel his people dying around him. Whatever you want. Name your terms. Our terms are simple. The Concord will dissolve. A new council will be formed. One where every species has an equal voice. No more classifications. No more tributes. No more slavery disguised as protection. That would destroy everything we built. What you built was a prison, Yara replied. You just never realized you were prisoners too. Trapped by your own arrogance. Blind to the suffering around you. Her voice softened slightly. We don't want to rule you, Ambassador. We don't want revenge. We want what every species in this galaxy deserves. The right to choose our own future. The darkness continued to spread. The first light was barely visible now, a fading ember behind walls of shadow. You have 1 hour to accept our terms, Yara said. After that, the darkness becomes permanent. Your homeworld will freeze. Your people will die. And we will move to the next world and the next until the Concord understands that this era of empire is over. She leaned forward. Choose carefully. The transmission ended. The council chamber fell silent, except for the quiet weeping of dying Sithari. Vrethon looked at the fading light of his sacred sun. He thought of all the species the Concord had conquered, all the worlds they had burned, all the peoples they had broken. He had never thought of them as equals. He had never thought of them at all. Accept the terms, he said quietly. The other council members stared at him. Accept the terms, he repeated. We have no choice. And perhaps, he paused, his crystalline body dimming, perhaps they are right. Perhaps we have been blind. The vote was unanimous. The message went out to the human fleet. Surrender. Complete acceptance of all demands. Aboard the Prometheus, Yara received the news. She nodded once, then gave the order. The arrays began to retract. Light returned to the first light, pouring over Kethforin, like water on parched earth. The Sithari collapsed in relief, their bodies drinking in the brilliance they had almost lost forever. Yara watched the sun return to full brightness. Around her, officers celebrated quietly. They had done it. They had brought the Concord to its knees without firing a single weapon at the homeworld itself. One of her officers approached. Admiral Ambassador Vrethon is requesting a personal conversation. Put him through. Vrethon's face appeared on screen. He looked broken, his crystal body dull and cracked. But something in his eyes had changed. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something almost like respect. Admiral Chen, he said, I have a question. You could have destroyed us. You could have killed billions of my people. Why didn't you? Yara considered the question for a long moment. Because we remember what it felt like to be small, she said. We remember being afraid. We remember being judged unworthy by beings who never bothered to understand us. She met his eyes through the screen. We built those dreadnoughts to make sure no one could ever make us feel that way again. We darkened your sun to prove we could. She paused. We turned the lights back on to prove who we are. Vrethon was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he bowed his head. I think I understand, he said quietly. Perhaps I am beginning to understand. The new Concord was formed 3 months later. No species held power over another. Classification was replaced by cooperation. The chains that had bound 1,000 worlds fell away, one by one. Humanity took no territory. They demanded no tribute. They simply joined the new council as equals and began the work of building something better. Some of the elder races never understood why. They expected conquest. They expected revenge. The mercy confused them more than the weapons ever had, but Yara understood. And so did the others who had waited and watched and built in secret for 40 years. Power without wisdom was tyranny. Strength without mercy was cruelty. Humanity had proven they could darken suns. Now they would prove they could light the way forward. The galaxy would never forget the species. That had been called non-threatening, and humanity would make sure they never forgot the lesson they had learned. The stars belonged to everyone, and no one would ever take them away again.